Welcome to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast, brought to you by www.legaladviceinparadise.com. Even in one of the most beautiful places in the world, life can be litigious. On this podcast, the best and brightest legal minds gather to help you navigate your way through every legal question you may face. This program will help you know your rights, know what steps to take, and help you find the best legal representation, all in simple, easy to understand terms. And now, here's your host, Justine Gronwald.
Hello, Agents of Change. This is Justine of Legal Advice in Paradise, and we're here today with attorney Jim Hochberg. Thank you for coming on the show, Jim.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Okay, I graduated from law school in 1984, so this is my 30th year, and I have the whole time basically done real estate, contract-related commercial construction, leasing and buying and selling businesses, that kind of stuff, as the work that I do commercially to get paid. And I have a pro bono project that I've been doing since the 80s, representing believers in religious liberty cases where their constitutional rights have been infringed, and people can't really pay for that kind of legal representation.
Right.
And so I do it with Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a national coalition of 2,200 lawyers across the country that do these cases, and we help each other and that kind of thing.
Well, that being said, let's focus on the pro bono part. We'll be having Jim as a recurring guest to talk about all the areas that he just talked about. That's his expertise. But what we wanted to focus on today is what happens if you're attacked because of your faith. And we just want the listening audience and the agents of change out there to know what does happen. A lot of us are not going to expect any of this to happen. And that's the theme of my show, is that it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when you may need legal help and guidance. And, knowledge is power. So what Jim is going to provide us today will, maybe it's not applying to you. Maybe you know someone, or if you know of someone in the future, this will be very valuable information. So I'm going to give it all to you because, of course, I am learning like with the rest of the audience. I'm not an attorney. I do have my experience of going through my own litigation. But what we're going to focus on is what Jim has to offer in the area of, what's happening in our nation today and also in Hawaii. So I'm going to let him take the reins in that, and I'm going to be like your ears and eyes. If something comes to my mind, I'm going to ask him a question, and hopefully, no question is a stupid question, hopefully. So take it away, Jim.
Sure. American society today is almost split 50-50 between people who understand the Founding Fathers' vision for our country and people who want to change that. They want to redesign American society, fundamentally change the foundations. And they've been working on it for decades, and they're very well funded and they're very organized, and they're actually 3 steps ahead of us. You wonder how it is that we have same-sex marriage. They want to fundamentally change American society, and they've come here in Hawaii and other places. But because there is that conflict, believers find themselves often accused of violating standards because their faith calls them to do it. You look at the Health and Human Services mandate in Obamacare that has spawned all of these lawsuits where people and companies and even the Sisters of Mercy, a religious order of women religious, like nuns, are being told by the federal government that they must buy health insurance that includes what are known as abortifacients, medicines that can cause a woman to abort her baby if she has unprotected sex and is worried about becoming pregnant. And these people, because they're Christians, don't want to have to pay for that kind of medicine.
For what they don't believe in.
Correct. And the federal government is actually taking them to tasks through the court system. Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Wagon are two cases that are at the Supreme Court of the United States right now, where Hobby Lobby is owned by evangelical Christian family, and they created this craft store.
I've heard of it. Now, is it nationwide?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah, they have,
Okay.
I think, I don't remember the number of employees and the number of stores, but it's a huge, huge company, and they don't mind. They want to give their employees health insurance, and they want to give they don't mind giving their health insurance that might include contraceptives, but they don't want abortifacient. So out of 20 different kinds of contraceptives, 4 of them are abortifacients, and the 4 they don't want to give have them in federal court. And it's because of their faith.
Right.
I have a case right here, 2 cases actually, right here, right now.
I was going to ask you, what are the ones that are happening right in Hawaii? We touched on it a little bit when I first approached you on being a guest, and I'd actually like you to touch on the one about the woman who had her rooms for rent.
Okay.
Could you go on
Sure.
that one?
There is a very charismatic Catholic woman and her husband. They're grandparents. They have a 4-bedroom house. Their children grew up and have their own homes with their own families, and having these extra rooms, 3 extra rooms, they are willing to rent them out, and they do it as a bed and breakfast, where they provide breakfast.
And they're licensed, and
they pay their taxes, all that stuff.
Okay.
And even if they didn't, it wouldn't matter, because that's not part of the case. But so they advertise on the internet that they have a Bible study that they host on Thursday nights, and you're free to join them if you want. And we think that's why they got targeted. They got a call from a woman that was a paralegal in a San Francisco law firm who wanted to schedule the bedroom with the big bed for her and her girlfriend to sleep together in. And my client, being a serious Christian woman and also understanding the law in Hawaii, said, I'm a Christian. I'm really not comfortable with the 2 of you sleeping in the same bed in my house. Can I refer you to a friend of mine down the street who also has a bed and breakfast who can accommodate you?
So she offered to.
Yes.
She didn't like slam dunk her and say no,
No, she was very kind.
And start throwing scriptures at her or anything. I mean, she was very kind about it, and she offered an alternative.
And they had a choice at that moment to say to themselves, well, we really wouldn't want our vacation in Hawaii to be negatively impacted by living in a place where it's uncomfortable for everybody, because she doesn't want us there, we're going to feel uncomfortable, so no problem, we'll go somewhere else. And the other choice they had, which is the one they took, is they filed a complaint with the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, and they filed it under the Public Accommodations law. Public accommodations are accommodations, which isn't defined, that provide goods or services to the general public as customers, clients, or visitors. And then there's a list of examples that's non-exclusive. And one of them is hotels, motels, or other places of transient accommodation. And so they sued her at the Civil Rights Commission under that statute. She contacted me to defend her, and this was in 2007.
Yeah, you
the
told
phone
me
call.
It's been
the
some
claim was
time,
made in
yeah.
May of 2008. The Civil Rights Commission used their processes until December 2011, and we've been in court since 2011. So it's a very long process.
It's very long.
And that's why people can't afford to pay.
Right.
I mean, it's serious, difficult constitutional law areas, and in my opinion, people deserve to have good representation.
And now, when someone files a suit against you and you become the defendant, you are obligated to answer that,
Correct.
aren't you? And so that's when it all starts.
Correct, although this was an administrative process in the Civil Rights Commission. And you have to understand, there are 5 commissioners nominated by the government and ratified, approved by the state Senate, okay? one of those 5 commissioners is a transgendered man by the name of Kim Koko Iwamoto. And he dresses like a woman, he acts like a woman, and he's one of those 5. And you know that in Hawaii, our aloha spirit tends to make us not make people feel uncomfortable when we're in the group. And he's in the group of 5, and the Civil Rights Commission is very pro-gay issues and very anti-religious liberty issues if it's butting heads with the gay issues.
Right.
So she came to me, I looked at the letter, I responded to the letter by pointing out, number one, she lives in the house and she rents fewer than 5 rooms, and there's another statute that the Civil Rights Commission enforces called the Discrimination in Real Estate Transactions, and the renting of a room in a house is covered. And there's an exemption. If you live in the home and you rent fewer than 5 rooms, you're completely exempt from the discrimination prohibitions.
Okay.
And expected the Civil Rights Commission to ignore that, which they did. And so we spent those years in the Civil Rights Commission. We had a reconciliation meeting, which is a settlement mediation meeting where everybody's supposed to show up. The 2 lesbians didn't show up. One called in on the phone.
And they live on
They live on the mainland.
In the mainland.
But they were supposed to be physically present. That's the requirement. And what they wanted was $20,000, and they wanted my client to post signs inside and outside of her home saying that she would never again discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation.
Now, let me ask you this, Jim. How do you come up with an amount of $20,000?
That's what they came up with.
Stemming from a phone call saying, I'll refer you to someone else.
That's just the way the legal system works.
Now, we also kind of touched on what can the listening audience do? You mentioned something about check your liability insurance.
Well, you should.
In this case, and this is something I would have never thought about. I mean, I don't think anybody would think to do that. So give us a little bit more detail of how that can help in a situation like this, be it a business, or who does it apply to? Does it apply to individuals, businesses, or?
If you own a home, you have homeowners insurance.
Right.
If you rent a home, you can purchase renter's insurance, and it protects you from liability for things that you do to other people that injure them.
Okay.
You have auto insurance for car crashes, right? And so insurance typically does not cover intentional acts.
Okay.
And discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation is never an accident. It's always intentional. So what I tell people to do is contact your liability insurer and tell them that you want their company to cover that intentional act. And if enough people are asking the insurance industry to do that, they will realize that there will be a lot of revenue they can get, and they may have to defend some claims, but if they're offering that insurance, half of the country will want to buy that insurance.
Well, let me ask you this. What are the insurance companies hearing now? Is it something that's coming up more now?
I have been suggesting that people do this because my client's insurance carrier denied coverage because it's an intentional act.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we went through the Civil Rights Commission process. The Civil Rights Commission has the power to hold hearings and make rulings and order damages be paid. They can order punitive damages be paid. They can order you to affirmatively do things or not do things, like hang the signage in your house. But they didn't do that in this case. Instead, they gave the lesbians a right to sue letter, which allows them to exit the administrative proceeding and go to court. And so they filed their lawsuit in 2011, and on the very same day, before my client even knew about the lawsuit being filed, the Civil Rights Commission actually filed a motion in the case asking the court to allow the Civil Rights Commission to join the case as an intervening plaintiff against my client.
Wow, so it's like a double slam.
And the court allowed it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
So for the everyday person like me, exactly what does that mean? They ganged up on her?
Well, yeah, and what they're trying to tell the court is that the legislature has made the Civil Rights Commission by statutory construction and has branded it the expert in the state government on handling the 3 statutes that they enforce. So their opinion is supposed to have more weight than anybody else's opinion. And of course, that's wrong because the judge makes his own mind up.
Exactly. Now,
You know.
let me ask you this. In my case, I thought I was going to have a jury, but it was a non-jury after all. Are jurors asked to, are they asked to be in these types of
This
cases?
case is asking for a jury trial.
Now, is it the first of its kind?
In Hawaii, yes.
In Hawaii.
Not state nationwide. The homosexual activists aggressively are making these cases to create the legal precedents, and they go to places like Hawaii, which is pretty liberal, and then they use our case somewhere else.
There you go.
So they filed a motion with the court saying that the case should be governed by the public accommodation law. We filed a motion with the court saying no, the exemption protects her and that's the law that should apply. And what the judge did at that hearing is he ruled against us. He ruled that because she sometimes rents for less than a week or for a week, that's a transient accommodation, and so she's like a hotel and a motel, which nobody lives in the hotel and motel. The other law is the one that protects the homeowner in their house.
Oh, I
Okay?
see. Wow.
And then after the hearing, before we left, the judge invited the attorneys into his private area, and he told us that he thinks he's correct, but he might be wrong, and he offered the right for us to appeal that ruling then, rather than have the rest of the case and appeal it later. So that's what we did,
Okay.
and we've briefed it. It's currently sitting in the Intermediate Court of Appeals workflow, and they'll get to it when they do.
Okay.
What we intend to do, if they rule against us, is ask the state Supreme Court to hear the case, which they don't have to. You have a right to appeal to the Intermediate Court of Appeals. You don't always have the right to appeal to the Supreme Court. So if the state Supreme Court either denies the request to hear the case or rules against us, we will ask the United States Supreme Court to take the case.
Wow. So this is ongoing.
Yes.
And you in your mind, we talked about liability insurance, but are there other steps that people can take if they find themselves in this situation?
Well, I'm also representing 2 churches that have been sued because the local atheist activist couple believed that they didn't pay the school system a sufficient rent to use the schools on the weekends for their church services. And they originally filed last year. We filed a motion to dismiss. It got dismissed. They've refiled again, which the court gave them the permission to write it better, and they did. And we filed a motion to dismiss, which is going to be heard on the 27th of May this year, 2014, and we'll see what happens. But it's churches serving the community, using the
Right.
public schools, and some atheist activists don't like it, and so they get involved and file a lawsuit about it. I mean, what people need to understand is there are people that are aggressively opposed to the organized Christian church and the members.
And that's where reaching out for help. So if you can tell our listening audience out there exactly who they can get a hold of.
Well, they should call me because I'm the Alliance Defending Attorney.
Okay.
Attorney here in Hawaii, Alliance Defending Freedom Attorney.
So are you the only one doing
Sean
that?
Louise and I do it together.
Sean Louise.
He has his own practice as well, and Representative Marcus Oshiro is getting trained this July, so he'll become one of them. And so we'll have 3, and then I've been doing it since the 90s since the 80s by myself, and a couple of years ago Sean went and got trained. So. So like with same-sex marriage, the legislature told everybody that they completely protected the church and the pastors.
Right,
And
you
they-
mentioned that, and after the special session, from what I understood, and I'm just, like everybody else, we just hear it from the news. After the special session, they said, don't worry.
Right, they said that they used the
Okay.
strongest language they could find across the country from Connecticut, and that's a lie too, because they didn't cut and paste the language. They picked some of the words and they changed it in other ways. But what the law says is, if a person with a license to solemnize a marriage, which is pastors are licensed to solemnize marriages, they're allowed to refuse if they don't want to do it.
Okay.
And they won't be subject to a fine.
Okay, but what's the loophole? I guess there's a loophole to that.
Well, there is,
Or-
because every case has two parts. The first part is the investigation to determine whether you violated the law, and the second part is if you did, what's your penalty? That's the fine.
Okay.
So they've only said you won't be subject to a fine. They didn't say you don't get investigated and be proclaimed as a bigoted, homophobic church or whatever.
So in other words, it made everybody feel good that they had this, but really nobody knows the details
Correct.
as to. There's another part of it.
Well, actually, there's several parts.
Oh, several parts.
Solemnization is the magic words that are said in every wedding.
Okay,
By the
yeah.
power invested in me by the
Yes,
state
okay, I
of
was gonna
Hawaii,
ask you
I
exactly
pronounce
what
you
is
man
that.
and
Okay,
wife.
okay.
So you're allowed to not do that.
Oh,
But it
I
doesn't
see.
say you're allowed to not do any other parts of a wedding. See?
Oh.
That's the odd
So
thing.
specifically, it says you can
Solemnize,
refuse
to solemnize.
Solemnize.
Yes.
Okay, but the other parts of the ceremony
Are excluded from the protection. So whether the Civil Rights Commission...
that's just a tiny little
It's-
piece of it.
Yes. And there were
Oh.
18 members of the House of Representatives in special session that tried to get SB 1 amended on the floor. They offered 24 floor amendments, and there are 51 members, so 18 isn't enough to carry the vote, and they lost on every single one. Some of those were designed to better protect the pastors in the churches. So we don't know the answer to the question if a gay couple came to the church and said, we want to get married here, but we don't want you to solemnize. So we're not asking you, we'll bring our own solemnizer, but we want
bring
you
your
to do
facility.
it.
We want to use your...
Well, not so much the facility, because that's covered in another part, but we want
Oh,
you
okay.
to do the praying and the, reading from 2 Corinthians 13 or whatever, and, all that kind of stuff. Asking the questions, doing the ring, but you don't have to solemnize. I can't tell you if that would be a case the Civil Rights Commission would take or not. And then on the side of protecting the churches from having to make their facilities available to celebrate marriages,
that's
that
one
is
key
protected.
point. Okay.
They are protected. However, churches do a lot of other marriage-related things. They do marriage counseling. If two gay married people want marriage counseling from a pastor, and he says no because he doesn't agree that same-sex marriage is valid to start with, there's no protection for that in the statute at all. My church in particular, at the end of every service, the pastor invites anybody celebrating a birthday or a wedding anniversary in the next week to come down for a special blessing. This December is going to be the first year anniversary of the December same-sex marriages that were done in December of 2013. What are the pastors going to do when a man and a man or a woman and a woman come down to have their same-sex marriage blessed because of the anniversary? The pastor's going to be put on the spot, and they need to be aware. They need to know in advance what they're going to do so that it's not a mistake.
Let me ask you this. Because of this, do the pastors, do the priests, do people out there who lead congregations or that sort of stuff, do they know what to do in these cases?
I do a lot of speaking in churches
Is becoming
about
more
this.
aware?
I do a lot of
Okay.
speaking in churches about this.
Okay.
And if any churches that watch your podcast want to have the presentation, they should contact Eva Andrade at Hawaii Family Forum. And it's hawaiifamilyforum.org on the
Okay.
internet. She's the one
Okay.
that coordinates these, what we call Community Action Network
Okay.
trainings. And they're really good. People love them.
Yeah.
And the part that I do includes talking about the SB1. But there's a whole other twist to the same-sex marriage outside of the statute itself. The statute does not adequately protect pastors, only lets them not solemnize, and it only protects them from not paying fines. It protects the church from having to use their facility to celebrate the marriage, but none of the other marriage-related things that churches are involved in. And the third part of it is the Civil Rights Commission handles sexual orientation discrimination claims, and they issued a written memorandum in October of last year, just before special session started, answering the question, when is a church a public accommodation subject to the non-discrimination in public accommodations law that they enforce, which is what was enforced against my bed and breakfast client. And what they said was, if a church does not want to be a public accommodation, it has to act like a private club. It cannot let any non-members use any of their stuff, facilities, equipment, whatever, which means a church that allows a classroom to be used every Wednesday afternoon by the Boy Scouts, or that lets a 12-step program meet on Monday nights, or that has some kind of kupuna program in the daytime, anything that's not a church function, that's that they let another organization use their facilities, Civil Rights Commission will view them as a public accommodation. And so if a claim is made with the Civil Rights Commission, the first thing they're going to do is an investigation. Who do you let use your premises?
Right.
And give us all the records from the last period of time, whatever they pick. And then they will say, aha, you're a public accommodation. You cannot discriminate this way.
I see.
And we're going to punish you.
Wow, this is stuff I'm sure a lot of people don't know about this.
A lot of people don't know
A lot
because
of
the
people
press
don't know this.
doesn't report it, and the legislature lied about it.
Wow. Well, that's some really great nuggets. We need to really think about these things because it affects us now that, it's passed. So, so we really need to reach out to you then, Jim.
Yes. And the interesting thing is Pastor Alan Cardenas from New Hope, Nanakuli, likes to say, he does part of the trainings with Eva and I.
They just got together yesterday,
okay.
The pastors, right?
Yeah. And what Alan says in his part of the presentation is that the old paradigm in America has been, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly.
But these days, if you're a Christian and you're standing on your faith against these gay activists, you're guilty because of your faith. And that's a new paradigm, and we have to be aware of that.
But Jim, I just want to bring out that when I went through my own case, and of course it's not even near this, but it had 5 claims attached to it, I felt like I was guilty as the victim. And the defendant was lying like crazy on the stand, and there's nothing I could do about it. So I kind of know what that feels like, and it does not feel good, people. So any of you that know of anyone, if you go to your church or just anyone that does business, if you have any questions, you should get a hold of Jim Hochberg. And what is your phone number?
808-534-1514. And the thing about this whole sin thing, let's take homosexuality out of it and just say sin in general, has eternal consequences.
Oh, yeah.
So why is the state telling people to just go ahead and do it? Whatever happened to separation of church and state?
Yeah, that's a whole different issue right
yeah.
there, huh?
Yeah. And so we need to take our place in the elections. We have to register to vote. We have to know what the candidates stand for, and we need to vote for people that have our values, so they're representing what we want the country to look like.
And don't you offer a newsletter of some sort that people can subscribe to, so that you will view what the candidates' views are and then vote accordingly?
Yes,
and mention, tell the people about that.
Sure, that's because I have a charity called Hawaii Family Advocates, and the website is hawaiifamilyadvocates.org, and it's advocates plural with an S on the end. And that is a 501c4 charity, so it's tax exempt, but we're allowed to intervene in elections. We're allowed to affirmatively support, endorse, or oppose candidates, which most charities that are C3 charities, they're not allowed to do.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is finding some House candidates for the House of Representatives in Hawaii, and we're finding good candidates that are in districts that they can win in, and we're going to do what's called independent expenditures on their behalf. where we did it in House District 36 for Beth Fukumoto in 2012. We sent 4 mailers to a group of people that share our values. Then I have this database that I can micro-target people on specific issues, and it gives me their addresses. And so we mailed those out. And the candidate, we didn't talk to the candidate about it because we can't coordinate. And she won by 500 votes. She beat Marilyn Lee, who had been in that seat for a very long time in Mililani, and Marilyn Lee's husband had the seat for a very long time before Marilyn took it. And Beth won by 500 votes. And the neighboring House district, Lauren Cheap Matsumoto, won by 89 votes. So 500 votes is a large margin in a House race. So we're going to be doing that. And so June 3rd is the last day for people to become candidates. So after June 3rd...
That's very soon.
Yes, it's a couple of weeks. After June 3rd, we're going to go through all the candidates in all those districts, and we're going to come up with endorsements, and we're going to come up with a list of people that we believe are not suitable for public office. And we will publish that on our website. People are free to go there and use that information.
Well, that's a great tip, because, you know, a lot of people are saying, why is this all happening? I mean, just about everything that affects our lives. And, you know, your vote is really important. You need to go out, make sure you're registered, and make a difference. You know?
Yes, and you need to register if you've changed your name or moved since the last election. You need to register if you have not voted in the last 6 elections, including primaries and general elections and any special election in between, because they take you off.
Oh.
So if you are registered and you register anyway, it doesn't do anything. It's perfectly fine. So I'm telling everybody, just register now. And the ballot or the registration form also has an application for permanent absentee ballot to be mailed to you, and I'm urging people to do that too, because it makes it very, very easy.
Are people able to do that online?
You have to have an original signature. So the document is available online, but you have to print it out, sign it, and hand deliver it.
So where would they go, do you know?
The Office of Elections website. So just Google State of Hawaii Elections Office.
Okay, good. And then they can have the form right in their hands. Okay, that's perfect. Well, I want to thank you, Jim.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to have you as a recurring
I'm glad
guest,
to do that.
because not only does he take care of this pro bono, which we're very grateful that he's here for us, he does the other areas. And tell us again the other areas of practice that you do.
Well, I like to call my commercial practice gentleman's law.
Okay.
And I call it gentleman's law because I don't represent criminal defendants. Nobody's going to jail. I don't do family law, so people aren't getting divorced or fighting over child custody or whatever else happens in family court. And I don't do car crashes or medical malpractice. Nobody's bleeding. You know, basically I represent business people who are trying to resolve some legal problem that they have in the most efficient way so they can move on with their business. And I do things that revolve around contracts, real estate transactions, business transactions.
Which is very important.
Construction
because,
issues, mechanics lien issues, commercial leasing things, buying and selling property businesses, that kind of stuff.
Tell people how important it is to have an attorney draw up a contract.
It is. You know, people grab contracts off the internet, and each state has its own contract law. And so if you use something that somebody designed for another state, just as an example, if you are entering into a contract to do residential construction, the contractor has to have things that the legislature has demanded be put in the contract. And if those things are not in the contract, that contractor can't sue to get paid under the contract.
So here's an important nugget, because in my case, I drew up the agreement. Even though there were changes made, the other person made initials. We both agreed to certain changes. We initialed, we signed, we dated. It didn't hold in court, people. So take his advice, and we'll have him back on the show to cover some of that later at a later time.
I'd be glad to.
Okay. So thank you very much,
Thank
Jim,
you.
and we'll see you later.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast. For more information, visit www.legaladviceinparadise.com.